From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, this is Dateline Malacañang and here are the news. On the top story, Philippine Volcanology and Seismology or PHIVOLCS Director Teresito Bacolcol in a palace briefing said that preparedness is the key to address the effects of natural disasters. Philippines has long been identified as a disaster-prone area as it sits within the Pacific Ring of Fire. Bacolcol assured that measures are in place for the effective disaster response in the country.
For all these disasters, the best course of action is always preparedness. And when we talk about preparedness, we have to make sure that our buildings, our houses are earthquake resilient. Meaning, we have to follow the minimum engineering standards when we construct our houses or buildings. And also, although we do regular earthquake drills, quarterly, ang laki ng naitulong ng NDRMC sa pagpukaw ng kamalayan ng mga Filipinos when it comes to earthquake preparedness. But these are not enough kasi even if you do the cover and hold, if the building will collapse, hindi rin siya effective. So again, we just like to emphasize that the best course of action, first and foremost, is to make sure that we follow the minimum engineering standards.
Public queries on government response for the big one or the possible tremendous earthquake caused by the movement of the West Valley Fault came after the deadly quake with magnitude 7.7 in Myanmar Friday.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Department of Public Works and Highways or DPWH yearly conducts structural improvements to strengthen public infrastructure. DPWH Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral said this in a palace briefing as she assured the public of the government's initiative in response to big natural disasters. Based on the DPWH data, Cabral said more than 124 assessments and retrofitting were done in public buildings in Metro Manila. The DPWH also invests on equipment called quick response assets. All of these are intended to prepare for calamities in the country.
Kami naman po sa DPWH ay tuloy-tuloy ang paghahanda para sa ating earthquake preparedness. In fact, every year po may programa kaming structural improvement and strengthening ating mga infrastructure, particularly public buildings at school buildings, mga tulay, napaka-importante niyan. We have already completed more than, I think, 124 assessment and retrofitted mga public buildings in Metro Manila. Meron na rin po kami nakaprogramang 500 plus public buildings na funded po ng aming local fund and ODA. Meron kaming partnership sa World Bank. Ito ay para sa 425 pang public building to retrofit and strengthen this public building to make sure they are aligned with international earthquake standards. In terms of readiness of equipment, ang DPWH po ay merong more than 2,000 equipment na nakakalat sa iba't ibang rehiyon, hindi lang dito sa Metro Manila. But for Metro Manila, we have 500 plus equipment na tinatawag naming quick response assets for the immediate response in case of calamity. Meron din kaming mga technical assistance sa iba't ibang national government. Like for example, LRTA, we have already assisted DOTR para i-assess po ang structural integrity ng ating mga railway at saka light rails and MRTs. And ang emphasis lang po namin ay tayo ay lahat dapat maghanda. Especially po yung mga kailangan natin ng suporta ng ating mga kababayan, ang mga local government officials, local government units, to make sure that the public infrastructure and private infrastructures are ready in case of any calamities in the country.
DPWH Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral.
Dateline Malacañang.
Office of the Civil Defense or OCD Undersecretary Ariel Nepomuceno emphasized the agency's major programs to support disaster preparedness in the country. Among these programs are centered on national simultaneous earthquake drill, capacity building among responders, and public participation. He explained that the whole of community approach plays an important role in these initiatives. Participants from the academic community, private sector, civil associations, and the like shows that disaster management is everyone's responsibility.
So number one is NSED improvements, more scenarios that will be practiced by all agencies, both national and local government units, plus the participants from the private sector. Pangalawa, yung kapasidad mismo ng pamahalaan, both in the national government and the local government units, binabantayan natin na lalo pang mas dumami yung ating mga kasamahan that will be given the special skills, especially for the collapse structure rescue. So marami naman ho tayo. Ang backbone namin will be, of course, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, meaning Army, Navy, Air Force. Kasama rin namin ang PNP, Philippine Coast Guard, and the BFP. Sila yung ating backbone, plus the volunteers from the local government units. Marami naman tayong sanay na, subalit padadamihin pa natin sila upang sigurado tayo that once needed, they are ready bilang paghahanda, including the equipment and again, the communications capability. And lastly, we are now leveling up public participation. We are already institutionalizing partnerships with the private sector. For example, we have formally signed agreements with the Chamber of Mines, the academic community such as UP, and other educational institutions. And then we're strengthening our partnership with the Association of Civil Engineers of the Philippines, organizations like that, so that the government will not be doing the management for disaster alone. Kailangan namin ang mas malawak at mas malalim na partisipasyon ng private sector. Because again, we assure you, based na rin ito sa utos ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, na pagbutihin natin paghahanda. Subalit kailangan din natin ng tulong ng private sector. And this is the norm worldwide. The government, private sector, civil society will have to work hand in hand with regard to huge incidents.
Office of the Civil Defense or OCD Undersecretary Ariel Nepomuceno.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang addressed public fears about China's probable invasion of Taiwan, stating that the government is prepared for any situation. This comes after Armed Forces of the Philippines or AFP Chief of Staff General Romeo Bronner reminded Filipino soldiers to prepare for a possible Taiwan invasion as China intensifies military maneuvers near the island. During a news briefing, Palace News Officer and Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro stated that while preparation is critical, there is no urgent cause for concern. She recognized the significance of Bronner's warning to the Army and the wider public to always be prepared for any potential situations. The palace official reaffirmed that the government has contingency measures in place should a confrontation emerge, emphasizing that Manila is always prepared to respond. In reaction to rising regional tensions, particularly after China's military conducted large-scale drills near Taiwan, Castro urged Filipinos in Taiwan to stay put and assured them that the government is prepared to act properly.
Pakinggan po natin at nabasa din po natin ang statements po ni AFP Chief Romeo Bronner. At sa aming pagtanto ay hindi naman po dapat mabahala ang taong bayan patungkol po dito. Tama lamang po na magkaroon po siya ng reminder sa buong troops, pati na din po sa taong bayan na we should always be prepared in all contingencies. Yun lamang po. At kung may mga detalye pa po patungkol dito ay hahayaan na lamang po natin si Secretary Teodoro at saka si AFP General AFP Chief Romeo Bronner sumagot po dyan. Opo, sa mga ganyang contingencies, kung magaganap, lagi po tayong handa. Katulad po ng sinabi ni AFP Romeo Browner, lagi tayo dapat handa sa anumang contingency. Kung mangyayari pan po yan, hindi po tayo dapat magtulog-tulog sa ating posisyon at sa trabaho, lagi po tayong handa. Pero again, ang detalye pong iyan ay ibibigay po natin sa ating Defense Secretary at kay AFP Chief Browner. Thank you. Stay put. Basta po, tandaan po nila, ang gobyerno po ay handang tumulong sa anumang oras para sa kanila.
China ordered its army, naval, air, and rocket forces to surround Taiwan for exercises characterized by Beijing as precision strikes and an island blockade. In response, Taiwan reportedly dispatched warships to its coastline. China claims Taiwan, which it sees as a breakaway province, and has threatened to invade the self-governing island using force if necessary.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang told China that no foreign nationals visiting the Philippines are being mistreated. Philippine Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said this in a press briefing. This comes after the Chinese government warned Chinese citizens about what it called a unstable security situation in the Philippines. The Chinese embassy in the Philippines issued a travel alert advising Chinese people in the Philippines and those wanting to visit the country to strengthen security precautions and emergency preparedness. The embassy also mentioned the alleged heightened security risks faced by Chinese residents and institutions in the Philippines, as well as the alleged frequent investigations and harassment of Chinese citizens and businesses. Castro stated that Chinese nationals are not mistreated in the country. Castro further said that no matter of Chinese nationals working for Philippine offshore gaming operators or POGOs is a separate issue because they are involved in illegal activities. She stated, the Department of Foreign Affairs is willing to discuss with the Chinese government the concerns surrounding the Chinese people who have been arrested and deported because of their links to illegal POGOs.
Ang kanilang travel advisory ay it's just a normal consular function of China. At we can assure China na hindi po tayo nagtatarget ng particular nationality or particular national na para iharas. Tandaan po natin, lahat po dito ay welcome, except po, of course, kapag gumagawa po ng krimen, i-implement po natin kung ano po ang batas. Malamang po nasasabi po nila ito dahil sa ating pagpapatupad dito sa POGO na dapat ay mawala na sa atin at karamihan po dito ay mga Chinese nationals. So malamang po ay isa ito sa nagiging issue po. Pero muli, ang DFA po ay open po for discussion regarding this at i-assure natin muli ang China na wala po tayong tinatarget na particular national.
Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, the Philippine Air Force, or PAF, announced that the second batch of rescuers under the Philippine Interagency Humanitarian Contingent, or PIAHC, has left for quake-devastated Myanmar aboard a C-130 transport aircraft that took off from Villamor Air Base, Pasay City, early Wednesday morning. This deployment follows the arrival of the first batch of Philippine rescuers and medical personnel consisting of 58 members who safely reached Myanmar on Tuesday after leaving the country early in the day. It said this mission underscores the Philippine government's unwavering commitment to swift and efficient disaster response, providing much-needed support to the people of Myanmar during this challenging time.
Dateline Malacañang.
The overseas absentee voting, or OAV, in Myanmar and Thailand, both jolted by a massive earthquake, will push through as scheduled on April 13, the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, said. COMELEC chairperson George Erwin Garcia said the OAV in the two quake-hit Southeast Asian states runs until May 12, the election day in the Philippines. He explained that they would send the ballots through diplomatic pouches to be secured and protected. After the elections, Garcia said the ballots would be mass-fed into automated counting machines or ACMs to count the votes cast. Meanwhile, more than 8,000 Filipino voters in Thailand would use internet voting. Garcia urged overseas voters to enroll in internet voting to be able to participate in the national polls. There are over 1.2 million registered overseas voters. They will be electing candidates for national positions, only 12 senators and one party list group.
Dateline Malacañang.
Repatriated Filipinos from Myanmar, Myanmar revealed that there is a new operation of scam hubs that focuses on Filipino migrants in the United States. In a statement, the Bureau of Immigration or BI said scammers use social media to encourage Filipinos to invest in fake cryptocurrency investment. The BI added that, at first, they will show that the currency is earning, but after they invested even more money, the scammers suddenly disappear along with their money. One of the repatriates said that one of their companions, alias John John, volunteered to find a new way to scam Filipino Americans. In the BI's investigation, John John turns out to be one of the recruiters and not a victim. The Bureau continues its investigation and intensified its campaign against human trafficking and online scam. The agency advises the public, especially those abroad, to be wary and not fall for online investment scams.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine Department of Agriculture, or DA, said more measures are underway to tighten the implementation of the maximum suggested retail price, or MSRP, for pork following low compliance among hog traders. The pork MSRP is set at 380 pesos per kilogram for liempo or pork belly, 350 pesos per kilogram for kasim or ham and pige, and 300 pesos per kilogram for sabit-ulo. In an interview, DA spokesperson Assistant Secretary Arnel de Mesa relayed Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr.'s dismay after majority of stakeholders failed to comply with their agreement on pork MSRP. The DA met with the pork producers, viajeros, and retail representatives on March 28 and 31. He said Chu Laurel disclosed those plans to the stakeholders, which will be put in place in case compliance remains low. The DA is also eyeing the utilization of a tracing card to track the movement of pork products. To implement the use of cards, he said, the DA Agribusiness and Marketing Assistance, or AMAS, will coordinate with the Food and Terminal Incorporated, or FTI. To date, retail compliance has increased to almost 40% from 30% on Monday, while compliance with the agreed 230 pesos per kilogram farm gate price of pork from producers is around 88%. Based on the DA's recent monitoring, retail prices of pork remain high in select public markets in Manila, Pasay, Mandaluyong, and San Juan. As of Monday, the prevailing price of pork liempo in Metro Manila was pegged at 420 pesos per kilogram, with prices ranging from 360 pesos to 470 pesos per kilogram, and the prevailing price of pork kasim is 360 pesos per kilogram, ranging from 330 pesos to 400 pesos per kilogram.
Dateline Malacañang.
Finally, for Dateline Malacañang, Finance Secretary Ralph Recto defended the transfer of idle and unused Philippine Health Insurance Corporation or PhilHealth funds, as well as those from other government-owned and controlled corporations or GOCC into the national coffers. Appearing before the Supreme Court, Recto said the decision to secure funds was a common-sense approach to allow the government to forgo borrowing funds abroad to fund key projects. He noted that by 2022, when President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. took office, the national debt had soared by 7.47 trillion pesos, surpassing the combined debt of all previous administrations and bringing the debt to GDP ratio from its lowest level of 39.6% in 2019 to a high of 60.9% in 2022. He said it against a backdrop of geopolitical tensions as well as supply chain disruptions from the pandemic. Congress mandated in the 2024 General Appropriations Act to sweep the unused idle and excess funds of GOCCs to raise more resources to support the President's priority programs and enhance economic recovery efforts. He pointed out that, based on the 2024 GAA, the country had an appropriation of 5.76 trillion pesos, of which only 4.27 trillion pesos was supportable by revenues. He said that reckoned on a daily basis last year, expenditures amounted to 15.8 billion pesos a day in cash, of which 11.71 billion pesos in cash was funded by revenue collections and the rest 4.10 billion pesos in cash by loans. Recto added that the move to sweep the unused excess idle funds of GOCCs, including PhilHealth, is in line with the principles of the medium-term fiscal framework to ensure the country's macro fiscal stability. And just in the pandemic, that brought the Bayanihan 1 and 2 laws. Recto said the measure may be seen as a Bayanihan 3, which is not funded by new taxes but one funded by the funds already in our possession and mobilizes all available resources, all idle excess and slipping funds to help the economy recover faster, create more jobs, increase incomes, and reduce poverty in the process. The SC hearing oral arguments challenging the Department of Finance mandated transfer of PhilHealth's 89.9 billion pesos excess funds to the National Treasury. Of the excess funds, 60 billion pesos has been transferred since 2024, while the remaining tranche worth 29.9 billion pesos remains on hold after the SC issued a temporary restraining order.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that is all for today's Dateline Malacañang for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This has been Bea Gaza-de Guzman.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.